Hey, welcome to Supper with Stella. Today we're going to be making a Beet Tarte Tatin. So typically a tarte tatin is made with apples. It's served as a dessert. It's like an apple pie that is kind of baked opposite. So you do the apples first, caramelize them in some sugar, then you put some puff pastry on it, and when you bake it, and then when you're ready to serve it, you flip it over and invert it so that the apples are on top. But I'm gonna do a kind of sweet and savory version with beets. I have a ton of root vegetables that I've pulled out of my garden. At this point, it's been well over a month that they've been out of my garden in the refrigerator, and I'm just trying to use some things up before the quality starts to go down. Root vegetables do have a pretty long life, but every day that they're in that refrigerator is, one less quality day that they're in there. So kind of getting to the point where I want to get things used up. So beets being such a hard vegetable, I need to go ahead and roast these before I even begin making my tarte tatin with them. So what I've done is I have gone through my beets and I've picked out the ones that are roughly the same size. So there's a couple of different varieties so that these dark red beets don't bleed all over my lighter beets. And in just an attempt, we'll see how it works, but in an attempt to actually preserve kind of the unique look and the different variety of beets that I've grown, I'm gonna roast them separately. So I'm gonna make foil packets for the two types of beets that I have. I'm gonna leave them whole. As I said, they're roughly all the same size, but I'm gonna leave them whole, skin still on, so I have not peeled these yet. They've just been, like I said, prepped, meaning the little tail end of the root has been removed, the greens have been removed, they've been washed, so trimmed up, they're ready to go. I'm just gonna roast them in foil packets with olive oil, salt, and pepper, and then once they are pretty easily pierced with a fork or with a knife, not super soft, but as soon as I can get a knife to go into them easily, I'm gonna remove them, and then we'll really start to work on the tarte tatin. So I'm just gonna do foil packets, like I said, of the different colors. So I'm gonna start with the lighter color beets, and I am just gonna make this very simple with just some olive oil, salt, and pepper. And I've got my oven preheating behind me. It is on, I believe I put it on 450. And it's gonna take a little while. Beets they are dense, they are really hard, very similar to like a rutabaga. The texture is fairly similar to a carrot, but a carrot's a nice thin long cylinder. So it roasts up much more quickly than, something that is, circumference is larger than a quarter. So just toss them in it. And I want to keep my seasoning on this very simple because I really do want kind of the flavors. I'll be adding a little bit of sugar. I said it'll be sweet and savory. Really want kind of the flavors that I add to the tatin itself to really come through. So simple seasoning on these. And oftentimes when I roast beets this way, I will go ahead and cut them. But again, just in kind of the look that I'm going for with the tatin, I do want to leave these whole. All right, so get the other color in. And there is actually a good bit of seasoning left in the bottom of this bowl. Yeah, that's fine. I'll do separate packet of foil. I know you can't see this one as well. And then I am just gonna rinse off my hands. Okay, so to do the foil packet, it is simple. I might need an extra piece of foil, we'll just see. You wanna get this airtight though. And so oftentimes with beets, because their roasting cook time is so long, they're frequently done in a foil packet because then they roast, but they kind of steam also. So you do want it to be as airtight as possible. So one packet, And I'm really, I mean, there's no method here. I'm really just crimping the foil as best I can to steam these. Really, they're steaming, but they're at a higher roasting temperature as opposed to like a lower 350 baking temperature. Okay, so those look pretty good. So I'm gonna put these in. And since they're covered, I'm not really concerned. Burning isn't really a concern. I'm gonna put these in for 30 minutes. I will then check and just see how some of those thicker beets are doing. I'll be back in a little bit when these are roasted up. All right, so my beets have roasted for, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes maybe, and they are easily pierced with a knife, slips right into them. So the next step that I want to do is to get them peeled. Okay, so I've got my beets peeled. In all honesty, these were tougher to peel than ones I've previously purchased at the store. They also, the skin didn't really seem as thick as what I'm used to. So it could be, and yeah, my hands are gonna be stained for a little while. Not super stained though. But it could potentially be that just the variety that's commonly sold in the store is different and maybe has a thicker, like a thicker skin that A, you want to get off, and B, comes off a little easier. It could also be size. So I did notice that first off, this darker beet, so what I'm fairly certain are my bull's blood beets, they were a little bit easier to peel and the skin was a little bit thicker. So and the larger the beet was, the easier it was to peel, and the more it was like, okay, yeah, this is why we peel beets. So doing this again, these little tiny ones, I don't think I would bother peeling them. Might peel the larger ones though. So, but like I said, I've never really been successful with growing my own beets. So this is somewhat of a learning curve for me. So to make the tarte tatin, first off, you want to kind of caramelize the bottom. As I said, this is going to be sweet and savory. Beets are slightly sweet, but they're mostly like a savory, earthy scent. So I'm going to add what you commonly add to beets. I'm going to add a little sugar, not a ton. So a little sugar on the bottom. And then non-traditional for this non-traditional tarte tatin is I'm going to add a little bit of sorghum syrup as well. So sorghum is, you find it in the South a lot. I don't know if other parts of the country use it frequently. It's traditionally, I believe, sorghum is harvested towards the end of summer, beginning of fall. And so you'll find the syrup in a lot of dishes for the fall, which I am not in the fall right now, but beets are available. They're fresh in the spring and the fall, so I thought this would be just kind of a fun way to have a slightly different flavor than just sugar. Sorghum, it's somewhat like molasses. It's kind of like a molasses cane syrup. It's got a pretty unique flavor though that's honestly kind of hard to describe. It's delicious, and I'm really excited. I think it's going to go fantastic with the beets, but just an experiment. We'll see. So I've got these over medium heat. I am just going to let that start melting. Want to get the beets sliced into equal size slices, not wedges like you would with a tarte tatin, but or with an apple or pear tarte tatin where you do wedges. But I want to do slices of these, and then I am going to get them into the syrup. And I know I said I had a variety of beet. So these are going to be, the slices will be about a 1/2 inch thick. So these are fairly small beets. Most of them I'm just slicing in half. A few of the larger ones are getting sliced. I'm getting 3 slices out of. Okay, so things are starting to melt up. And I wouldn't want to, I mean, I don't think anyway that I would want to use just sorghum. It is a fairly strong flavor, so that's why I did that's why I added some sugar too, to just add just a little sweetness. So this is melting, so I'm gonna turn it down to low. And my oven, I've turned the temperature down to 350 on it. So I just want a thin layer of basically caramel, right? I mean, I've pretty much made a sorghum caramel to coat the bottom. Oof, made a mess. I'm gonna just turn this off and just let residual heat do what it will. And then I am just gonna layer my beets in just as they fit in. Just a single layer of each slice. And just kind of make them sporadic a little bit. And since these beets are cooked, I'm not really looking to get a ton of color on them. But I will get a little. Okay, so a traditional tarte tatin uses puff pastry. I, however, am using crescent dough. This is a single sheet of crescent dough. Usually you find it with the little perforated like triangles so that you can cut it out, or so that you can pull it apart and roll up individual crescents. But they now make it in just a solid sheet. And I think that it is a really nice twist on puff pastry. It's got a little bit more flavor. I think it's a little more forgiving to work with. But yeah, it's just something I really like to use. And I'm not even gonna use, well, I am. Hang on. So I am just going to roll this out just a tad. I really don't want it to be any longer. I just want it to be a little wider. It's a rectangle and I need a square. I actually need a circle, but I'd take a square. Okay, so this is gonna go okay, so this is just gonna go on top, and then I am going to just gently cut my excess away. I am very gently going to tuck it in. Not under the beets, I can't do that. I mean, it's also a hot pan, so be careful. But just tucking it in. And this is very thin. If these were apples, it would be a much thicker. But I just did thin slices of beets. Just kind of working out a recipe right now. So it's tucked in. It looks like this. So I'm gonna stick this in the oven. And since my beets are already cooked through, I am really just cooking this until the crescent roll is puffed up and golden brown. Okay, so we're back. I just flipped this out of the pan and I hadn't hit record, so you didn't get to see it come out of the pan, and I'm so sorry because I was so genuinely excited when it came out and looked good. But I've put it on, I did it on this cutting board, which is the cutting board I usually use. It's got a little rim around it like to catch meat juices, and it is fairly juicy. I thought it would be juicier than this, so that's why I wanted to have a rim. But you can see how it is, and I'll bring you in for a closer photo in a minute, or a closer picture in a minute. One thing well, let me back up. So I baked this 10 to 12 minutes, which is just what the crescent roll package directions said. If you want to use, again, a tarte tatin normally uses puff pastry. You could totally use puff pastry. I just like the flavor of crescent dough, and I think that it's a little bit easier to work with and less finicky, so that's why I chose to use it. This is fine with puff pastry though, so if you want to do a little more traditional route, by all means do it. I just think crescent dough's got like a nice like yeasty flavor to it that puff pastry doesn't. But baked according to package directions. I then brought it out of the oven. I let it sit for 10 minutes to kind of let the sugars harden back up just a little. If I had let it sit for 15 to even maybe 20 minutes, I probably would have had less leakage. So next time I will let it sit for a little bit longer. One thing I completely forgot to do when I was filming, you know, I've got things working on the eye, I'm doing the sugar and the sorghum, and I'm just standing here talking about sugar and sorghum and thinking there's something else that goes in here. Like, I know there's something else that goes in this pan. It's butter, okay? You want to do sugar, sorghum, butter. Butter is gonna help it release. So after it had been in the oven for about 5 minutes, I realized it was butter. It was butter that I forgot. So I peeled it back a tad and in a few different places and threw some butter in. So yeah, it'll be in the recipe that I include, but just be aware, I totally forgot to do the butter. But this is absolutely gorgeous. So there, you can see how pretty it is. And you definitely can see, you know, I've got 3 different types of beets in it, which really comes through. And I'm just very excited that this recipe worked out. So I will post a finished recipe for this when I get the video posted. And yeah, I'm excited to give this a try. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.